so many issues. In fact, later today, I'm planning to oil my bicycle because that's clearly the next plan now. I drove to work on a near empty tank, and that's a situation for a lot of Nigerians, those who need it for their vehicles, for their businesses, people that live hand to mouth. I'm talking the vulcanizers, the welders, those who grind pepper in the market, and so on, those who have to use their generating sets for work. I could go on and on. So this is a boat we're all in together, sadly. And I mean, we've listened to the NNPC from February the 15th to yesterday, things that have been said. So let's have this conversation, all-important conversation. As you've seen, Mr. Olabode Shomi is a special legislative aide on gas and power to the Senate President. He's the Vice Chair, Gas to Power Study Group of Nigerian Gas Association. As an oil and gas expert, joins us this morning from our Abuja studio. Well, Mr. Shomi, thank you for joining us on the program. I'm almost tempted to ask where you got petrol, you know, to get to the studio today, because that has been the conversation between people now. The first thing you hear is, how far? Where did you get petrol? Do you have petrol? Can you get petrol for me? But I'll jump into the main issues straight away. We've listened to the NNPC, and two things come out for me. So as at 15th of February, it was said that we have over 1 billion litres of petrol in stock, and we're expecting 2.3 billion by the end of the month, which, by the way, was 3-4 days ago. If anything, we have not seen all of those, over 1 billion litres or 2.3 billion litres. So clearly there's a disconnect between what the NNPC has promised time and again and the reality. So is it that there's a disconnect from the NNPC? Because it looks like they see this supply or they have this supply, but the people don't have it. So who do we believe right now?
I think first and fundamentally as Nigerians, we have to look at our history. I think petrol scarcity in terms of queues in public is not exactly new. For those who are familiar with the Abacha era, I'm talking about the pre-1999 era, there's been, there was a lot of distance. But it's not important so much as to cry about a history of bad things, but to look at how a number of all these things were solved. In this particular case, what anybody and what everybody should be looking at is verifying what figures are being put into us, which is also a responsibility for the media, by the way, and also to check the supply chain process itself. So the truck leaves the depot and it gets to the final destination, it is offloaded, and it sells to the public. So does the truck, does he actually leave the depot? Does this truck, does he actually get to the filling station? Does this filling station, do they actually sell? And I'll give this example. It was Friday last week, and I was on my way to see a client when I noticed that a truck was offloading in a petrol station. So I decided to stay with them. It took them about 2 hours from when I got there for the offloading process to finish. And after that, I bought a full tank, which I have used since then. But it is interesting to note that the petrol station only sold to about 10 people, and then they closed shop. So it is not impossible that there will be a few petrol stations. I mean, given by that example, it is not impossible that there will be a few petrol stations that will have fuel and will choose not to sell to the public. So it is a question of the supply chain process being properly monitored and being ensured that it does what it does. So if NNPC say they have a few million litres available to Nigerians, it is incumbent upon us to verify that those litres are there. And if those litres are there,
when you say it's incumbent
what
upon
happens
us,
to the rest of the supply
Mr.
chain?
Shomi, just a moment. When you say it's incumbent upon us, there's a regulator. Okay, I imagine you don't mean Nigerians should start opening, you know, the tanks of the filling stations to check, do you have petrol? We have a regulator. I mean, that's why we have government. If not, people will just do all they have. But they, you know, put the mandate in the hands of government and say, ensure that you manage these resources for us. Put regulation in place. Ensure things run smoothly. So who should ensure that these filling stations that have supply, that their trucks have left the depots, sell? Clearly not the people.
And I totally agree with you. It's not the people in terms of responsibilities. It is government responsibility. However, in this case where it appears that there's a disconnect between what the government is saying and what is available to the people, so that we can speak from a position of knowledge rather than guessing, it now becomes incumbent upon us to find a way of verifying it. Let me be clear. In every single society in the world, you have non-governmental organizations. And non-governmental organizations are given that name because they do certain jobs that government ordinarily should do. But because of government inefficiencies, imperfections, and bureaucracy, they are not able to perfect it. And it is that reason that non-governmental organizations are exempt from tax.
If I get you correctly, Mr. Shomi, you're saying that government has failed on this one, so people should take it upon themselves to do the job of those regulatory agencies.
That's far from what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that
you said the NGOs should take it on because government has not been efficient. I'm not sure that's the word you used, but you clearly are saying that. So what are you saying then?
I am saying that NGOs exist for a purpose. It appears that we do not know why NGOs exist. So that is what I'm trying to say, that the process of governance and the function of governance is holistic. So, in fundamentals of government, when they used to teach it in schools, they would say everybody is government. So government,
no,
what I'm just trying to say...
everybody is not government. I'm sorry I have to cut in here. Everybody is not government in that sense.
Oh, that is the definition of those.
Let me land on this one, Mr. Shomi. So everybody is not the GMD of NNPC, for example. Everybody is not the president, the minister of petroleum. So I think there's a simplistic angle to that one, which makes sense. Everybody should be a part of government. I mean, engage the people. But when it comes to regulation, I mean, NGO essentially means non-governmental organization. So if you say that NGOs should be doing the job of the regulatory agencies, then you're saying that those regulatory agencies are not doing their jobs. They have failed on it. I mean, it's clear what you're saying, but yet you say that's not what you're saying.
Yeah, that's because you did not listen to me and you did not allow me to land.
I'm sorry, please go on.
When I say I've run an NGO before, okay, I've run an NGO before, and I've attended the NGO conference in New York. So it is possible I understand what NGOs do. What I'm trying to say in very simple terms is that NGOs exist to support the function of governance. And that is why NGOs are exempted from taxation all over the world. The purpose of a non-governmental organization, check it across board. The things that NGO does are things that ordinarily government should be doing. Now, what I am saying is that the NGOs that you have across this industry, or NGOs that offer whatever services across this industry, need to also up their game. The point I'm also raising is that when there are imperfections in the service delivery or in the information that is passed across, there must be an independent way to verify this information to the extent that we will be able to actually know what is happening. In this case, rather than us guessing, rather than us giving an input or an analysis that does not exist, there is a need to actually find out what is happening. And why I referred to pre-1999 was that fuel queues were normal to society, or we thought it was impossible. But it came a 2-month period with the Obasanjo administration that everything ended. So how were those things done at that time? So there's a need for us to look at the issues with a way to resolving it rather than pointing fingers. And when I say governance is the responsibility of everybody and everybody is governance and position are not the same thing. And we should not mistake that. Everybody cannot be the GMD of NNPC. It is not possible. Everybody cannot be the regulator. It's also not possible. But everybody has a role to ensure that regulation is properly done. That is the difference between what I said and what is being interpreted.
So, Mr. Shomi, how does that happen? You have mentioned NGOs, and I would assume that includes civil society organizations in the petroleum, in the energy sector. So how do these things happen? In terms of whether or not people give feedback to government, the fuel queues on the roads are feedback to government. The number of black markets, peddlers of fuel, that's feedback, which government doesn't even need any data. It is something that everyone can see. So when you say people should be a part of the process and check to confirm the veracity or otherwise of figures or data that government releases, how does that happen?
Okay, so I'm not talking about data in this case. I'm talking about the fact that what has been announced by the government in terms of the availability of fuel is something that needs to be verified. Because if there is fuel and we are not feeling the impact of it and there is no availability of it on the roads, there's a disconnect. So it's either somebody is saying an untruth in this case, or there are other issues to it. Now, if in truth there is the fuel, what are the other issues that could be to it? Because the idea behind all of this is that we want to get the problem solved. So the idea is not that we want to point fingers at governance. The idea is not that we want to say government has failed. I mean, whether it has failed or not is a different issue. But that's not the idea. The idea is that we want the hardship to end. So if we are looking at solution, if we are solution-oriented, if we are looking at a solution, then we have to look at the bottlenecks within the supply chain that could possibly be the issues. And the solutions to getting the solutions to these bottlenecks is what I'm talking about. So if the supply chain is resting on an hybrid of a function between government and the private sector, in which case is within the NNPC and the distribution chain, then we need to check what is really happening. The purpose of NGOs in this case is to offer the public, the listening public, the critical mass of the public that can put a pressure on government, an independent source of information, independent from what the government is saying. So it is basically how society functions. Okay. Because society will not just function anywhere by just saying everything is government. Yes, every rule is government, but there is also the critical mass of people who can put pressure on government to do the right thing.
Do you think, Mr. Shomi, and this is by no means intended to put you on the spot, but it's just a question that one would generally think about. You are in the energy sector and you work one way or the other with government. So do you think with the issue lasting so long, how many weeks now that we've been dealing with this, from bad fuel to fuel scarcity and all, do you think that government is sensitive to the plight of those who struggle to get petrol?
Well, I cannot speak for government in that aspect because I'm not a spokesperson for government. However, what we can say is that there has been, which is also obvious, is that there's scarcity in public, and government as at today appears not to be able to solve it. Those are facts. So other than that, I cannot speak to the mind of government. But what I can say is that there are actions, activities apparently aimed to alleviate it, and it appears that those actions and activities are not able to solve the problem. So it is for us to know what is really happening. Is it that those activities by government is being sabotaged, or is it by those activities by government are not actually happening? So rather than being armchair critics, so to speak, it is important for us to actually know what is happening so that we can put the responsibility on the door of those who should be responsible. That is my own approach and my thinking towards this.
All right. Do you think this has anything to do with the transition between the DPR and the midstream and downstream authority?
Okay, simply because there is an organizational transition does not mean everybody has gone to sleep. If you are changing office, Channels moved their office at a point in time from Ikeja to where they are in Lagos now. And they also moved even within Abuja. And those days when they were doing the transition, the office didn't die. They didn't stop transmission. There's a difference between operational work in terms of executing their role and what happens in terms of administrative work. There's a big difference. I do not think any reasonable person who is in those offices can use that as an excuse. However, it is important for they themselves to be able to say what is actually happening and what are the issues on a daily basis. Because it is dynamic, it is fluid. So the factors that are disturbing 2 days ago may not be the factors that are the issues today. So every day, it is important upon them. It is incumbent upon them, actually, for them to tell us what is really happening so that we can be able to hold them responsible or hold whoever is responsible in case it is sabotage.
So if they need to tell us what is really happening, clearly they've not been telling us what is really happening. So you see a gap in that one. So let's try this again, Mr. Shomi. So, I mean, we have the facts from the NNPC to begin with that we have over 1 billion liters supply. We're expecting over 2 billion liters by the end of last month. And there were talks about that being held back or whatever. But let's still stick to the over 1 billion supply. So that's one fact. We've also heard from those lifting the petrol. That's another fact, that they are lifting it for, what, 165 naira or thereabouts. So they can't even sell at the official pump price because they're business people. They need to make profit. That's also another fact. We've heard from the NNPC and others that there are filling stations that actually have this product, but they're not selling, they're hoarding. So that's also another fact. So we have a picture, as it were, from, I mean, people we trust, agencies and bodies that we trust. So those are the facts. So looking at the whole chain now, the fact that there's supply according to the NNPC, filling stations have it and they're not selling, and they're lifting it at, what, 165 naira. Who should be doing what now so that we end this?
I think, first of all, the idea that selling at 165 naira and not making any profit needs to be verified. And I'm saying this with every sense of responsibility because our supply, I mean, yes, there's the fuel subsidy issues, which itself is very opaque. I mean, nobody can actually be able to calculate in a transparent and verifiable manner the amount that is being spent on scarcity, but that's a different issue. But the point is, the Dsdp, the direct sale, direct purchase agreement, in which crude is exchanged for finished product, needs to be actually be checked, because ideally what is actually happening in that process is that we are exchanging crude for the finished product. It's at the root of all these things that certain things need to be verified. That is my own view. And a lot of the excuses that are being peddled as a reason for not making fuel available can actually be interpreted as economic sabotage. So it's incumbent upon all of us, just like we do a lot of review of the Ukraine war and a lot of review of all these things. We need to review the economics, the petroleum economics. It's not rocket science. We need to review the social impact. We need to review how this affects the system. Because
who should take the lead on this, Mr. Shomi?
Figures and all that.
Who should take the lead on ending this economic sabotage, you have said? And I think that's where we'll wrap up in 30 seconds.
Anybody can take the lead. Yes, ideally, it should be government, but it's not in everything that government takes the lead. When the U.S. wanted to land on the moon, at the point, the initiation was not with government. The point is this. There is an issue in society for which all of us are a part. Somebody needs to start it. It can be media, it can be civil society, it can even be foreign government, it can be anything. It does not really matter who starts it. The issue is that something needs to be started and then the solution arrived at. The idea behind that there must be a finger pointing to one person solving all situations is why some things never really happen.
Well, Mr. Shomi, we're totally out of time now. As I said, we had 30 seconds. You know, finger pointing is one thing. Taking responsibility is another thing. And I think that's what has been missing in all of this. But perhaps this is a conversation we'll have again. Hopefully when there's adequate supply, then we can actually just have smooth conversation looking forward. But I'd like to thank you so much for your time and your thoughts on the program. Mr. Olabode Shomi is a Special Legislative Aide on Gas and Power to the Senate President. He's also the Vice Chair, Gas to Power Study Group of Nigerian Gas Association and an oil and gas expert. Thank you once again.